per 9000's game room.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja, or for us in the UK, Hero Turtles, was one of those huge things you just couldn't escape when I was younger. I remember one Christmas they were the big thing to have, to the degree that people were fighting over the figures and some stores were even putting limitations on how many you could buy. I remember my mum, bless her, took my brother and queued for hours just to get 4 Turtles related figures for me that Christmas. She couldn't even get the Turtles and ended up importing American Turtle figures, which was actually awesome as they ended up being a little different to my friends' figures. Mostly the fact they had more menacing eyes. I guess because they're ninjas, not heroes. The theme tune to the show was burned into all of our young brains, and we would frequently scream out phrases like Turtle Power or Cowabunga! Heck, I still remember doing a dance and singing to Turtle Power with 4 friends in a school assembly. I had a half barrel on my back as a shell, and was Raphael because he was and still is my favourite. So I think you can see how much the Turtles meant to me. I'd played the heck out of the original arcade game, and I had the Sinclair Spectrum conversion of that on my shelf, so when I found out that there was going to be a SNES game, well, I was super excited. Turtles in Time is one of those games that when I started my attempt to review 150 games, I didn't think I'd ever review. Sure, I'd owned it as a kid and played the living heck out of it, but I'd sworn I wouldn't review anything that I couldn't play on real hardware, with a real cartridge that I owned. And every time I'd seen this game online, it was commanding such a high price I just couldn't justify grabbing it. It wasn't until a local store got a copy and I managed to talk them down from £40 to £30 for a loose POW cart that I got my hands on it again. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 Turtles in Time was originally an arcade game produced by Konami, and in fact was a sequel to the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game, and before coming to the SNES it didn't have a number attached to it. The reason behind the number 4 is because there was a Turtles game for the NES, which was then followed up by a NES adaptation of the original Turtles arcade game, which went on to be called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 the arcade game, which was then followed up by another Turtles game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 The Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was also a side-scrolling beat-em-up made by Konami, which was only released in Japan and America though. The third Turtles game features play mechanics similar to the previous game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 the arcade game, but it was an original title for the NES and not an arcade port. So, for Nintendo games at least, Turtles in Time was the 4th game. I guess in Europe they could have called it Turtles 3, but maybe they just figured let's not screw around and let the title get any more confusing. Okay, so the game's story is that Shredder and Krang have stolen the Statue of Liberty, and just to make sure the Turtles are really interested, they've also taken their friend April O'Neil hostage. They've done this to basically bait the Turtles, so they can draw them out and try to kill them. So you're probably wondering where the in time bit of the title comes from. Well, that's because, here's a spoiler, when you catch up with him, Shredder sends you through a time warp. This is part of what I think really makes this game ace. The time periods in which the Turtles end up in are really different, they're creative, and I think they've really helped to keep things interesting. Yeah, it's not the biggest, most spectacular plot point in the world, but it's one which fits in well with the characters and makes you feel like you're in the world of the show. This is really helped by the fact that the graphics in this game are bright and that everyone just looks like they do in the cartoon. You get to pick which turtle you are, so you can take the game on as your favourite, or you can take it in turns to complete it as one turtle and then the next. On top of this, there are all the villain characters a fan of the show could hope for. Not only are Krang and Shredder present, you will also see Bebop and Rocksteady, Baxter Stockman, Metalhead, the Rat King, Leatherhead, Tokka and Razor. This made the young me very happy, and you know what, it also makes me geek out now when I play it. If there's anyone I could add to the game as a playable character, it would be Casey Jones, as I always thought he was great, but in all honesty I can't moan about who is featured at all. The game has a perfect cast of characters. I really like the graphics in the game. It's not just that they're bright or that things are correct to the cartoon, it's just everything about the game's graphics, the backgrounds, the attention to detail. Not only are the Turtles done perfectly, you also have the awesome option to make the characters look more like they did in the comic book. This is something that they really didn't have to put into the game, but they did, and it's just such a neat little touch for the die-hard Turtles fans. Like I've mentioned above, the game is just so filled with characters, but they are all also brilliant to look at. It's great to see the turtles' expressions when they get hit or shocked or flattened or fall down a hole. I don't believe the graphics make a game, but by heck they do help make a good game even better. The game is not just a pretty looker though, it also has some darn good toe-tapping tunes which really help go with the tempo and feel of the on-screen action, and yes, they do throw the animated 80s cartoon theme song in there as well. Play the game for a while and you'll soon find yourself humming bits of tunes in your day-to-day life, which I always take as a sign of a good soundtrack. The fact that it stays with you after you're done playing really shows that it's hit a nerve in your brain. The boss music is great, it has the brilliant frantic feeling to it, but while it's a shame it gets reused so much, I would have liked to see individual end of level bosses actually have their own themes, but this is the smallest of nitpicks. After all, you know, if I'm mentioning things like this, it's because I don't have any really deep criticisms to make. The sound effects are good as well, and you have the usual noises you get when you're hitting your enemy or they're hitting you. Noises that reflect the fact that you've picked a power up, yelps of pain, and I love the cowabunga the turtles shout when finishing a level. Okay, so now it's on to the most important part of a game, the gameplay. And I'm happy to say that I think the game plays amazingly. The controls are simple, but this means that anyone can pick it up and play and get right into the game within minutes. The turtles do exactly what you want, how you want and when you want. The main thing is that this game is just darn fun. It's full of characters, handles well and really draws you into its world. The levels are pretty much medium in length, but this is a good thing. They feel reasonably long, but they never outstay their welcome. So you start the game up, watch a quick but cool intro and pick your turtle. Then you do what you do in most beat 'em ups. You walk from left to right, beating the heck out of whoever crosses your path. Most of the standard grunts in this game are Foot Clan soldiers, who you will recognise from the show. Different coloured members have different weapons and attack patterns, but these are the game's go-to grunts, with a sprinkling of robots and mouses and things thrown in. The levels have various traps for you to avoid, but generally it's a case of getting attacked by wave after wave of enemies. One of the neat things is that you can get your enemies to walk into swinging traps and laser beams, and after a bit you'll reach a boss, beat the boss, and you'll move on to the next level. In some cases it's not just a boss, it's two bosses who you fight together. For example, Bebop and Rocksteady come as a pair. The more you play it, the more you'll get their patterns down and the quicker you'll be able to beat them. Sure, it might not be anything too far removed from most scrolling beat 'em ups from the 16-bit generation, but it's one which Konami clearly did with a lot of love and polish. And I think that it stands up as one of the best beat 'em ups. In fact, I'd argue the only way to beat this game would be to turn off your SNES, plug in a Mega Drive and put on Streets of Rage 2. Part of me just wants to give this game a 10 out of 10. I think it's a fun game to play, I think it has great replay value, and I can very warmly say that I feel super happy to have it back in my collection. I do admit that I have certain biases, one of which being that I love this kind of game. I'm a huge mark when it comes to side-scrolling walk-along beat-em-ups. I'm also a massive Turtle fan, so it's almost as if this game is made for me. Put simply, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 with the understanding that I've laid out all of my biases, and that if you're not as into the Turtles or this kind of game, then it won't tick all the same boxes for you. But even so, I think it's one of the very finest examples of its genre. Now if you want to buy it, well, as I said, my copy cost me £30. It's one of the unfortunate parts of being a retro gamer. Some of the old classics now cost you an arm and a leg. There are copies of this from all regions going for all sorts of prices online. If you can see a copy of this for around the £30 price point, then I'd dive on it, as you'll see lots of people are trying to get figures like £85 or even more for a loose cart. With it being a license, it's not likely to end up on compilations or anything like that anytime soon. Of course there are other ways it could be sampled, such as EverDrive cartridges or hacking a SNES Mini, but I'll leave all those up to you. Okay, after talking about the Turtles like that, I have a desire to go get some pizza, so that's Kerr9000 signing off. Cowabunga!